G'day, lovely people. My name is Mark Prahalad, and I'm here with Mikhail Simic.
Hi, people.
And we are your hosts for this wonderful evening in Vienna, Austria. We're going to today talk about the API scan, as well as our web services, and the theory behind the API engine, the API scan, the web services engine, and mostly the API because it's amazing. For this MOOC, as a reminder, if you've been to any of our MOOCs before and have enjoyed our MOOCs, that we like to start on time and finish on time. We have started on time, and I have started the recording, so you will be able to get the recording after this session. Actually, it'll take a couple of days before we put it on our website, but it will be available for you to rewatch this MOOC after. Please ask us as many questions as you like on topic, and we'll try to answer them as much as we can, either during the MOOC while Mikhail is presenting, or at the end at the question and answer, and we'll make sure that we try to answer as many of them as we can. Let's jump right into there. Theory. Right, the theory of this. Firstly, some of you have seen the non-UI engine. Some of you have seen this before, if you've ever used Tosca before. And here you have the non-UI, scan application, non-UI. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory in that way. The non-UI engine is used for scanning applications that don't really have an actual user interface or a UI. That's why it's non-UI. It's able to read files and URLs, and for some of our customers, they still use it for their web services. Currently, our web services are being phased out. Not all of our web services, just our non-UI, and we're replacing it with the API scan. The end-of-life cycle for this will be in our next release of Tosca 10.3, and then we will give support for the non-UI for another 18 months about. But that's enough of the craziness of changing things in Tosca 10.3. We're in Tosca 10.2 for this demonstration, and let's jump right into the API scan. Oh yeah, I have to explain the difference. Here we go with the Web Services Engine 3.0, which is what the non-UI normally is. But what you may have been seen is how it looks now. Add example, request, transform request, communicate, transform response, response. That's a lot of information. But the business parts of it are really the N1, N2, and the result being 9. That's actually what we need, but it's not really what helps us. Some of you may be wondering, Web Services Engine creates test cases. True, it does, via talking with an API. What is an API? Some of you may not know. An API, by definition, is an application programming interface, which is a set of functions and procedures that allows the creation of applications, which accesses the features or data of an operating system, application, or other service. You can see that there are lots of information on this page, but if you had probably 30 or 40 of these, that's a lot of information to go through. That could be like streams upon streams of information to go through just to find the business relevant parts. This right now gives us a really good reference of how optimized the API scan makes web services. Wow, that's much better. I think it's much better, but I'm from Tricentis, and you'll probably agree with me. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. it actually does look much cleaner. It gives us our business relevant information, the N1, the N2, and then our add result in test cases, with our actual modes of either insert and verify, which is the business relevance that you would need to know. But instead of having to go through so many pages of information to find this actual information that you need. The API engine allows you to access the business relevant information right away. As I said before, this is the same test case as the previous one, just optimized through our API engine 3.0. So you can see from the last slide and to this slide just how much better it looks. Not only from a look perspective, but as a feel perspective. This actually ties into our next one, which is our Agile Devops cycle. If a developer looks at a test case and goes, or looks at an application and goes, I really like this, they can create something, talk to the QA people, and the QA people create test cases and are like, cool, and send it to the business analysts, and they're like, cool. Or you can use the API scan, which gives you complete freedom to explore the API. It is lightweight and actually can run on its own standalone platform. It's integrated in Tosca Commander, but you can use it outside of Tosca Commander without actually having a license for Tosca Commander. Complete standalone. Through the devs using the standalone API scan to create subsets that the QA testers can use, can start to create the real test cases with the test data needed for the devs, or from the devs, sorry, which brings the relevant information to the business analysts in English instead of it being an engineer, which I know some of you can completely agree. Developer talking to a business analyst, some things get lost in translation. The QA tries to help, but like us being in Austria, sometimes it's weird me translating from English into German and it not translating well. You can see how that cannot work. Here, we're trying to make it simplified. Here are some of the formats that are supported. We have some of the formats that are supported in our API scan, and our API engine as well. API scan engine, I'll probably say the two of them, but when I'm saying the backend API engine, what you can see, the API scan. Just to clarify that before anybody is confused. Here are the formats. Here are two of the formats that are supported in our API scan, which are XML and JSON. And then we have a giant list that would be too big to fit on this page, as well as take up too much time to explain them all. But if you need that broader list and would like to see everything that's supported, please refer to our knowledge base. Just look up formats supported by the API scan. Some of the techniques that are supported are SOAP and RESTful. And like I said with the last slide, this is just the small pieces that we want to show you. There is so much more that the API scan can use, but this is just the small pieces, and the broader list is on our knowledge base. Feel free to access it at any time. Next, we have some definition file formats supported in our API scan. SOAP, REST, WSDL, Swagger, or Swaga, it depends on who's talking really, and Waddle. You can see that these aren't everything that we can do, but it gives you a good image or picture of what is possible. This is not a full list, as you can see, but these are what we're basically showing today, or want to show you today. And then if you need more, feel free to refer to our support portal or our knowledge base for more information on this. We have some HTTP methods in the RESTful. This is the short list. We're not going too in-depth on them, but these are the ones that you'll probably see us use during this MOOC. Post, which you should know, create something. Get, it reads something or is getting something, as the name says, get. Put, either updating or replacing something. Patch, updating or modifying something that's already there. And then delete, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's deleting it. You have three major opportunities to access the API scan. First, it's integrated into the Tosca commander. So if you have Tosca 10.0 to 10.2, where it's optimized, it's built into the API. The API scan is built into the Tosca commander and is built into Tosca already, so you can access it right away from its own little tab. As a standalone program is another option. No license required, which you can use, but that would be a question also where it is and how to get it will be shown here in this MOOC. The Visual Studio plugin we will not show, but it is available. That would be a question for our support or engineers to answer in more in-depth and perfect for you. Next, I'm going to hand you over to Michael for the hands-on part.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for the explanation. A really good theory. Well, welcome from my side again here, people, and I just wanted to say I'm really happy to be here today. I'm seeing we have a really lot of attendees today, and it seems like it's a really hot topic today. So I hope this MOOC will be very informative and you will enjoy this MOOC. So just give me a time to minimize my slides here. And I have already opened Tosca Commander. And we will try immediately the mentioned API scan standalone to open. Well, I've opened Tosca Commander here. I will close it for you so you can really see that I don't need Tosca Commander to open to use the new API scan standalone. Where you can find the standalone, it's very easy. Under program files x86 under Tricentis. And there under Tosca test suite, you can then type in API. The first match will be our API scan standalone. How you see, it's an own application with a size of 20 megabytes, and you just can double click on it and you will start the application. Now the application is started, and like Mark mentioned before, it's not licensed. So everybody can use it whenever he wants and where he wants. So if you have your developers, you can just send them this file via email or sharing via network drive or cloud or whatever you want, and they can just double click on that application and already start with our new Tricentis Tosca API scan. Well, this is our standalone. Just give me a moment to open my Tosca again, and then I will show you where to find my API scan integrated in Tosca Commander. How you see, with our lovely Tricentis design here, we're using for this MOOC the Tricentis Tosca 10.2 version. I will start. Of course, my license was found. I'll just minimize my folder here. And Tosca opened on my second screen. Just give me a moment here. We'll begin from the scratch and start a new workspace here. Saying new, it will be a single user workspace, and I will call it MOOC API scan and say use workspace template. That's a very important point here, because you need the standard subset for the new API engine also. So then you're saying creating, and waiting until it was created successfully, say close. Your workspace will open. Just a few seconds, and we are right into Tosca. And I will show you when I open my project tab here, where to find the API scan integrated in Tosca. So if you see here in our toolbar here, you will see the tab API testing. If I click once of this API testing tab, you can see this icon API scan, and that's it. You click it once and it will then start the API scan. Of course, on my other screen again, here it is. And to show you that there's a real standalone here, I will just double click again on the standalone, and you'll see I can run them at the same time. So it doesn't matter how many instances I'm running, I can open it again and then work with this. Yeah? the big advantage, just give me a moment to close the standalone, the big advantage to use the integrated API scan is that I can immediately import my work, which I have done, into Tosca Commander. And that's it. That's the big difference between the standalone and the integrated version. So maybe you also noticed that the API scan is in the front and Tosca Commander is in the background, but Tosca Commander is still not blocked now. So I can do whatever I want in Tosca here. I can work, I can go switch to the sections and do whatever I want here. This is something really new. That's not a bug. That's literally really a feature this time. So our developers want that if you work in the API scan, that you should be able at the same time to also work something in your Tosca Commander. So these two things, these two components are different, let's say, individual from each other. So these are two applications who communicate with each other, but they don't depend on. So not like if you know the Xscan, if I start the Xscan, the Tosca Commander in the background is closed and I can't work anymore with the Tosca Commander. So this is not here. And that's a really cool thing. So if I'm doing anything and I'm saying, hey, I want really fast switch to Tosca, it's possible now. Okay, let's minimize Tosca here and let's go to the API scan tool. This is our window, our UI for the API scan. And how you see, let's go to the bar here. We have several icons here and let's begin with the explanation of these icons. If you hover over one icon, you'll see there's a self-explaining definition here. So just hover with your mouse on an icon and then a pop-up will appear here and explain you the function of this icon. Here, like in the non-UI scan, we have the possibility to read our files via file. So if I'm clicking it, I can direct to a file here in my Windows system and read it, or I can specify a URL, like here. Also, existing URLs you will save. So if you ever used the URL here before, you will remember that and you can use it again. I'll now take this as example and say okay. And here, if you see on my left panel, it already read it from my definition file, and I already have my first web service functions. But let's go back to the buttons here. If you see, you have the save, open, and close button. What does save, open, close mean? Well, it's self-explaining. Everybody knows what this means, but how we work with that? Let's say I want to work with my functions here, but I'm still not completed with my work. So I maybe want to save them and on a later stage to continue my work on them. So just click on save, and he will automatically create me a subset, a Tosca subset of that. I can save them and say, oh, here's save. And then I have saved my subset for that. I can say, oh, open a subset. It will be loading. I can choose my subset here and say open. Of course, it's already open, so now I can say close it. I close, and now I can say, of course, open. And then you will see it will open my same definition file with all the values with my saved status here. I'm also able to say duplicate. So if I have a function and I want to say, hey, I need more of them, you can just say duplicate over here also. Duplicate everything. And of course, I can say also rename. So at the end, this is my second one. Or if I just don't need it anymore, just delete it. Now let's go back and let's go over to this icon here. This arrow, or better said, also the API task has possibilities. This is our export import. You can see it how you want, yeah. From the API scan perspective, it's an export. From Tosca Commander perspective, it's an import. So if I have created my functions, let me delete this here, yeah, the add example. I can just go here and quickly import it in Tosca as with the new API engine. Or I can say here, click on this one here on the lower panel and say, oh, I want to import this as API test case, or as OSV scenario, or as web service test case. Well, the API test case is using our new API engine 3.0. We are also able, if you want to you can use the API scan to create your OSV scenarios. So everybody who is familiar with OSV will now also be able to use this API scan to create his OSV scenarios. Or we can also save all the done work as Web Service 3.0 engine. Very simple. I will do it yet. Just give me a moment. I will just change here some values. And I will once import it as Web Service 3.0 test case. Then he's processing something, and then he will save it in Tosca. If I go back to Tosca, you will see, oh, there's now a new component folder for that. And I will once do that as API Engine 3.0. How you see, he created immediately a component folder for that. So if you import some API test cases, they will be imported in a component folder. So you should be aware there are two processes. Even you create an own component folder, and then you can just set the focus on one component folder, and he will import this in this component folder, like now. You see my focus was in this component folder, and he imported it now in this component folder. Or if it's on the root level, he will create automatically a new component folder and import it there. I will delete now my third component folder because it's not necessary anymore. And I will show to you there is an error if you are not able to create a component folder because I'm already at the lower level. You will see that there is an error coming. Cannot export on issues. Please select the component folder in Tosca Commander. So if you forget it, you can then it will remind you, hey, create a component folder and go back to the feature that Tosca Commander isn't blocked anymore. This is the reason why. So if you forgot, for example, to focus on a component folder, you just go back to Tosca, create a component folder, focus on this component folder, and can export your test cases again. And here it is. Well, I will now delete this one. I will rename them so I know which engine this is. This should be our web service engine, our old one. And this should be our new API engine. So back to our API scan. We'll see here the buttons request and response. Well, these just shows my request and response of the web service here. So the response is already defined by our definition file, but sometimes if it's not defined, you don't know how the response will look like. For that, you can just go on and say, hey, I have my request, I know how it looked like, and I will just send it to the endpoint, and to the web service endpoint. So I will just say send, and I got a new response with new values with a correct value. Now we have the two buttons here, validate and preprint. Validate will validate the syntax here. So validate, if I'm saying not validate, he will show me where I got an error and why. So he is able to verify the syntax of XML and JSON. We are normally not also validating the content, but except it's defined in the definition file. For example, if I have now here a string, I should say validate, he will not say, hey, there's something wrong because it's not a numeric value, it's a string. So let's go back to 9 and say validate, and no error found this time. The print feature is really cool. So sometimes you have, if you work with web services, one-liner. They will then look like this. All values are in one line here. Or maybe they just look like that. Then I just can say, hey, make my pretty print, and I can now see my really structured payload here. Okay, that was the API scan itself. Let's look at the right panel here, the payload. Here in the payload, you're giving the payload over. Of course, the body, what you were sending, the content, what you're sending to your web service. Here you have our methods. Like Mark mentioned before, get, head, post, put, delete, trace, options, and patch. Here you are then defining the endpoint of the web service. And of course, at the end, the resource. If you're clicking here, you can also see the header parameters, our properties. So these were predefined by our definition file, which we imported via URL before. If I'm clicking now params, we'll see, oh, I will be able also to add additional properties like path, header, our query. If you ask yourself what is path and what is query, we'll get to that to a later point. Header, it's very simple. You can add properties into the header section of your of your request. Or if you just double click one row, it will create a new property. Or you can mark everything and say right click and delete. Let's go on to the last tab here, the authentication. We are supporting right now with Tosca 10.2 three authentications: basic authentication, Kerberos, and NTLM authentication. There are coming a lot of further authentications with the upcoming Tosca versions. So let's come to the left panel here, to our tree structure. You'll see the tree structure is pretty simple. You have a project root level, you have a component folder, and then you have these signs. They're just saying, oh, there's a functionality, yeah? And the function itself. When you see there's only one function, that's right at the moment not true. If you click once on that, you'll see, oh, there's another function. I'm doing it here, another one. Well, we are not loading that immediately if we are scanning the file or the URL. Why? Because this is related to some performance improvements. Let's say you have a definition file with over 15,000 functions defined there. Well, then you will wait a long time until it's scanned. So we could improve the performance with the situation that we are only loading one function, and if you need the other functions, because if you have about 50,000 functions, you don't need all of them. And that's the reason why we say, hey, just click once on the function you want, and it will be loaded. So then we can also guarantee that you are only using the functions you want. So after doing this, I have my request, I got my response, and maybe what I forgot to say in the response, we're also able to say the status code of the response and also to check the response time. I will delete my test cases here, my component folder here from the previous one, and say now, import this one. How you see, I forgot my component folder again. Just creating it, focusing on it, and saying, hey, import. Now when I imported it, I'll go into the structure and show to you now the models which were created. I double click on my request model, and you will see there is a new tab here. It's called Technical View. This Technical View shows me exactly the same view which I have in my API scan. So it's not a little bit different. It's not like in the previous, in the Web Service Engine 3.0 with all the nodes and the tree structure. It's like I saw it with a payload, like I would see it in a normal format. And now the really cool thing is like, hey, I want now to type in something else or to use these values in my test case. That's pretty simple. If I mark them and go to my API testing tab, I'll have these two buttons here as functionality. Add, to add a business attribute, business attribute to it, and also I can do it more times. Or I can say buffer if I want to buffer this value. So I will say here, I need these two values. Then I will go to response and say in response, I'm interested in status code, which is here. Then the response time and the result. Oh, sorry, I didn't mark it. Okay, and now you see, if I'm focusing on one business attribute, it will also mark me in the technical view where I can find this in a node. Also, it doesn't matter. Let's say I want my at result maybe on first place, so it doesn't care. We are using here XML path, our JSON path, if it's JSON format, to recognize where we can find them in the payload. Also here, in N1 and N2, let's say I want N2 in the first place and N1 in the second place, or other way. We'll always find the node. And also a really cool thing, let's say there are very technical description, or maybe they are not really making the description doesn't make sense. So I don't know what N1 is. Let's say I will just rename it and say value 1. I mean, it maybe also doesn't make sense to call it value 1, but I'm not very creative. So I will keep value 1 and value 2, and he will still find them. So he doesn't care how you name that or where they are, in which place they are. He will always find them. Also, let's say my result, I don't want to name it add result, I just want result. Status code and the response time can still have this, also can keep their names. After doing this, I can go over to my test case section, to my test case, and here I can expand everything. And now what you see is our parameters here, our business attributes. If I click double on that field, I have this drop-down functionality. Then I can have 5, 4, the result will be 9, status code should be okay, no, misclicked, okay. And the response time, I want the response time under, let's say 500. Oh, maybe also very important to mention, the response time is in milliseconds. So if I'm writing 500 milliseconds, that's a value of a half of a second. So if I'm writing 1000, then I'm accepting that it's needed the response time is lower than 1 second, sorry. And also what you see, the action modes are also immediately by default set into insert for the requests and verify for response. So this is automatically set. You can also manually say, okay, I don't want verify, I want something else, maybe constraint or whatever. And you can just manually change that. But from our logical perspective, we said, hey, if you have a request, you have to input some data, yeah? And for that, you need the action mode insert. And for a response, you're getting data back. So there, you maybe want to verify the data or buffer them. And also what we are able to do is to set the data type here. We have string, and here we have numeric. Yeah? So we could do these operations here lower than 500. Okay, we have some default values already paid in. If you recognize this, this is from the model itself. When we imported it, it took over the values which I presented in my request. These are defined in the Properties tab. If you see in the Properties tab, everything is defined there. If you click on the value parameter, you'll see here default value is 5. I can, of course, delete 5. Then I don't have a default value anymore. But yeah, I like default values because I'm lazy and I don't want to type a lot of in this smoke. I talked now a lot about how to do everything, but I don't know if you have recognized it. We already built our first test case, our first API test case. So let's run our first API test case. Just give me a moment. Now and say run in Scratchbook. And you see now the API test case, my progress window is on my second screen. I'm sorry for that. During the execution, the API scan is still running. So the API scan doesn't care if you are right now executing a test case or not. You're seeing you can at the same time work with the API scan. Now let's take a look at our results. If I'm going here, okay, everything went fine, of course. And then here, let's say, verification was successful, great. So our response time was under 500. I can see the expected value, the actual value, like I already know it from Tosca. So we have seen a green test case, but let's say this time I want a red test case, somewhere verification error. I'm taking a new status code and then I'm running this test case. And maybe you also realized already these test cases, the execution of the test case was really done quickly. So this is the big advantage to work with web services. It's already done very quickly. And during the execution, I want more to show you here how to that I can work with my API scan during that. So if I'm going back to my request, I can just say change the values here. Make execution is still running. 10. And let's say, oh, sorry, here we have it. status host verification has failed. And there we can see, expected value was this, and the actual value this. So it seems like it's working and like it should. So we didn't just set everything green. So you can see how that's basically really working. But go back to our API scan, and I could just send it and play with that. Well, this is what you seen. Just give me a moment. I will go to my web browser and type in an URL for that. Web service Tosca Cloud. These are web services which we host internally on our server. Yeah. So here you say we have a lot of services, and we're also using them for internal tests. So we have helper, basic authentication, calculator, and what we are supporting SOAP 1.1 and SOAP 1.2. So we are, like Mark mentioned, supporting SOAP and also REST services. And for the example, we have a Swagger coffee shop, but I'm not sure if you have all of the previous MOOCs. You know, if you know me, I'm not a really big fan of already prepared situations. So I was looking in the internet for a RESTful web service, which is not hosted by us, which is an external web service, which we can then automate. So I found the pet store Swagger IO. So this pet store web service has a Swagger file, which we can just copy and use it in our API scan. So for all attendees, this example here, the petstore.swagger.io, you can use it also on your on your environment. So if you can communicate, of course, with this endpoint from your network, you can use it. Please don't do this at the same time like me, because at the end we can be a little bit confused because I could get other data or your data instead of my data. So like I told you, I don't know this web service. So this web service is not hosted by us, so it can happen everything. But I like the challenge to automate external web services, because to show to you that it's working with really every web service. So I'm just scanning it via URL, saying OK, and I'm already now scanning my functions here. And like you see, it's working. So if I go now to add pet example, you'll see now we have a JSON format here. So I don't want really to talk a lot. I would just go dive into the practice and say, okay, I want to create a new pet. I will call my pet Mark. So my pet is called Mark, and it will have the ID number 1, of course. And I think that's it on the information. If I look in the params, authentication, I don't need for this web service these things. I can already send it. And now the response told me, hey, you have an ID 1, name Mark. So the response looked like the same like the request. So let's say I'm a little bit unsure. I have the status OK who's saying everything is OK, but I'm not sure if I really created now a pet. No problem, there's a function to see if there is a pet. I will just use the function get pet by ID. And now we are coming to the promised params tab, where we have our type path. If you see here, I have the pet ID resource at the end. Well, that's very easy. I have to click on the params tab to name my property pet ID, as same like I defined it here, and the value 1 for the ID 1. After that, the type is path. I can now go further. Like you see, there's no payload. So I don't need a payload, I just can send now my request. And what I'm getting back from my response, maybe I will click on response. You'll see this is how the response looks like, but I don't have really actual data in it. So I'll send my request and hope I will get the right pet back. If I'm sending it, I'm getting a pet with the ID 1 and with the name Mark. Seems like it's my pet. So let's say I don't like the pet anymore, so I don't care, yeah? Then I will just use my delete pet function. And here I have then the method delete, which Mark mentioned before. And again, the resource at the end, the pet ID. So what I have to do in the params, just have to define the pet ID. What you also can see, we defined a property here in the header, the API key. So to access the web service, in this situation, we don't need it, so we will leave it blank. We can still delete a pet. So my type is path, and I will just send a request, and the response is empty. Let's say I'm again unsure if the pet is now really deleted. Let's just look for the pet again. I have my pet, it's saved already my value 1 here, I just can send it. And I get my status code 404 not found and the error code here, error payload. So my message is pet not found, so I can be very sure that my pet was deleted and that the service, the function worked. So back to our request and the parent step, I told you I will explain to you what is this type path and what is the type query. Well, path, you can just define here the pet ID, and it will replace this term here with the value which I defined here, number 1. Let's say if I don't have that and delete a row, this won't work anymore. But what I can do it would be the same, like I would delete it and write manually the number 1 here. Then it would also work. Of course, I'm getting the error message because I don't have a pet, but this is what path does. Query would look like a little bit different. If I'm creating a property called pet ID with the value 1 is type query, the result would at the end look like that. Pet ID is 1. And this is the difference between path and query. Query would look like this, like a statement, and path would just write the value in it. So I will have to change from query to path because then the service won't work anymore, and to type in my term pet ID. So go to pet, let's create a new pet. Here I'm saying, okay, this time I want ID 5. The name of the pet will this time be Michael. And I won't change anything anymore. I will just say send. I got my response back with the ID 5, name Michael. I'll say get pet by ID. So I'm saying here the value is then 5. Saying send. It works. I got it back. And I will say also delete. Here, value 5. And send. Status code, okay. So what I'm now doing is I will select these 3 functions. I will go back to Tosca so I don't forget again to create a component folder or to use the existing component folder. It doesn't matter. I can use the existing one and to import it now as API task is there. Great. Now I have imported it. I have my models, and how you see, he created 1 request model, 1 response folder for each functionality. So let's try again to create our business attributes here. I'm interested, let's say, in the ID, also in the name here, and maybe in the status. So I can also, if I want to, just also say that I want to change my endpoint and to define also my resource and also the method, if I really want to. Okay there. So if I'm going to my add pet example, I will see I have all these parameters here. So it's really working, but I don't need really my endpoint and my resource, so I will delete them immediately. And I will go to response. And at response, I don't care really about the ID. Maybe I care about the name. I'll care about the name, and of course about the status code. So status I don't care, and response time this time I also don't care. Go back here, and what you are seeing here is already some business attributes here. So in the parent section, you already recognize there are some properties which has to be defined, and you already marked them and added them as business parameters. Also, we don't have any payload here if we want to delete a pet. So that's it. I don't need to mark here anything. And also I don't get a payload back, but I want to verify if the everything went fine, so I will get my status code. And this time I will also say I want my response time. Getting a pad, also don't have a payload here, but I have parameters. So if I'm clicking here, I already have my pad ID. And in the response, I'm getting back the ID. I'm interested to verify the ID. Let's say I also want to buffer maybe the ID for later things. And then say here, Michael, the name, I want the name of that. Status, yeah, let's say I will take also the status here. So, coming back to our test cases, I have my add pad here. I will open everything here and expand it. And now I can already begin to define my test case. So the ID 5 with the name Michael, with the status, I'm already sold off because I'm very famous there. I'm a famous pet. Everybody wants me. And let's say name as, yeah, of course, verification name and status code should be okay. Then go back. I will just move here the positions. And let's say pet ID will be 5. And I will also say here then the ID here. This time I will say in this section, I will save the ID I will getting back. So I'm saying, sorry, say the, how I will call it, I will just call it ID, don't care. Let's call it pet ID. And here I will say I will buffer it. Then I will verify the name here, Michael. The status, of course, will be sold. Verify. And then here I have to say, oh, I want to delete now the pet. So I can choose now 5 hour. I have buffered already my ID here. So I'm using the buffer, and say pet ID. So insert and status code here should be okay. And the response time should be lower than 500. So now I have created my test cases in Tosca, and I'm also able, if they're done, I'll just rename them. Create pet, get pet, and say, of course, at the end, delete pet. If I've created my test case, I will go to the green section, create an execution list, and say these 3 test cases I will put in my execution list. Pet. And I can now run everything in my execution list like in a normal test case, So API test cases are then as the same like our normal test cases. Great. So let's just begin to run. I have never tried it out before, so I'm not sure if it will be green. So if an error appears, I'm very sorry for that. But it's green, green, and green again here. Okay, just a moment until the pop-up appears here. And if I'm clicking the scratchbook, oh, not the scratchbook, I'm sorry, I'm in the execution list. If I'm here in the execution list, I can see in the log file that everything went fine. So verification was successful, status code also, get pet. If I'm clicking here in, also I buffered the value 5. Verification was also successful. I'm already sold. And if I want to delete a pet, just go in, and then you will say, hey, great. Everything went fine. And if you see the response time was really quick. It was only 7 milliseconds. And that's it. That was our hands-on example about API test cases and how to work with our API scan, and how, of course, to import these function, my API test case, my prepared one, in Tosca, and to prepare a real test case. So we will now, I'll just minimize Tosca and close my API scan. Well, now give me a moment to open the PowerPoint slide, go to our question sections. So Mark and I will give you a time to ask your questions right now, and we will answer them. So please don't be shy and ask your questions in the question box. Okay, there was a question. It was the response shown in the demo is a response from the downstream system, our simulated data. Well, my demo is not simulated, so it was a response from the actual system here. Also, people asked me our API scan again, if it's licensed, how they can use it. It's not licensed, and you will find it. It's packaged in every normal Tosca setup. So if you have installed Tosca, just go into the Tricentis home directory and you will find there the API scan standalone again. Great. Okay, another question was, of course, is it necessary to install the full Tricentis Tosca if a person wants to use only the API scan? Well, let's say to get the API scan standalone, yes, you will need one Tosca installation. But if one of you have a full this Tosca installation, you can just save the standalone. It's 20 megabyte somewhere, and then send it to everybody who needs it. So yeah, you will need it once, but then not anymore. The next question we had was, we are using SOAP UI. Can we import our existing work into Tosca? A good question. Yes, that's possible. For that, I will just escape from my PowerPoint slide, go back to Tosca, and if you go here to the Tools tab, you'll find the SOAP UI project icon. It's right now disabled because I have to go one level up, and now I can click it. If you click there, you can specify where your SOAP UI project file is on your system, and then you can import it as Web Service 3.0 engine. Right now, we are just supporting that it can be migrated to our Web Service 3.0 engine, but it will also be able to import it as API engine. Our team is already working on it. It's already in the backlog. It's already in the sprint, so it will come in the next Tosca versions. The next question regarding that was also, we are using also Postman. Is there a migration for Postman? Not yet. For in Tosca 10.2, there is no migration, also to import Postman projects into Tosca, but this will be so it's planned to have more imports from third-party programs. So yeah, it will be coming with upcoming Tosca versions, and we will focus on the most used ones, and Postman is one of them. So it's also one in our backlog, and it will come in the future Tosca versions.
A question came in: can we use the new API scan in Tosca 10.0, 10.1, or do we need to upgrade to 10.2? Currently, you can use it in 10.0, but it's optimized for 10.1 and 10.2.
Maybe we should also say in 10.0 this is only a pre-version. So if you're using in 10.0, it's not guaranteed that it will work perfectly. So if there is going something wrong, or you won't migrate your existing work from 10.0 to 10.1, this will not be possible. There are some workarounds. If you have this situation, please contact our support. They will tell you how to do that. But officially, in 10.0, there was no new API scan. It wasn't released until there, and so it's just a pre-release.
a question came in, do we need to create or install the API scan via C# coding? No, it comes with the installation of Tosca. So you don't actually need to do any coding or any customization and implementation. It is actually built into Tosca.
Okay, right to the next question. After you create an import and component, how do you bring in the updates to the web service? Bring in only the updates. So if I got this question right, you're asking how do I get the new values into the XML, yeah, into my request. Well, it's basically the values which you have here in my API scan. Of course, it closed it, but which I have now my business attributes. There I can specify my values and they are updating it automatically. So they are saved, the formats in our modules, in the module section, and there it gets updated and then sending the new web services XML files. Okay, there's a question I really like. It's yeah, the question was, it's a very personal question, so please answer a little bit neutral. I will try to. I'm sorry if I'm not able to do that. The question was, why should I use your API scan and not still using our old used tools, so like Postman or SoapUI? That's a very good question. Maybe I come back to a slide which Mark mentioned before. So you are maybe right. Our API scan has the same functionality like other tools. So that's not something new what we have now with the new API scan. So the new API scan provides the same functionality as the other tools already do. But if you remember this Agile Devops cycle slide, this is the main advantage you will have, this one tool strategy. Let's say the developer is using any API scan tool here, not our, it doesn't have even to be ours, okay? Let's say Postman, for example. The QA is using now Tosca or another tool, yeah, to another testing tool. So then the business analyst also needs the data, yeah, which the QA uses. So he probably works with Excel or some reporting. And here you will see you will have a lot of problems with the integration between the work. The developer is going to make his first tests via the API tool. He's giving the QA this tool, and the QA maybe doesn't know what to do with that tool, also with the work. So he's sending them some files, and they don't even know what to do. It's a very technical. So we will have XML structure and the XML formats or JSON formats, and the QA, maybe if they are not very technical, they will get lost there. Then the QA also needs from this data to create their test cases. And if they create then the test cases, they then need to provide the business analyst the test cases, the test data which they used. And the business analyst has to validate them. And this is the main advantage. Here you're losing a lot of time until migrating these values, the test cases from the API scan to the testing tool, if it's even possible, to create the perfect test cases for that. And I lost my mouse, sorry. And then, of course, then to report it to the business analyst, who is then validating them and saying if they are okay. If they are not okay, they're going back to the developer and you are going the circle again and again. If they're okay, it's going better. With Tosca, you have the API scan, who automatically integrates it in Tosca. In Tosca, the test cases will be prepared from the QA. The QA, with our new API engine, can just show the business relevant data here, yeah? Like you see with the first name, last name, gender. The business analyst don't need any technical view. He can just see the business relevant data here, and then he can validate the data and say, hey, this is okay, it's going to be accepted, and we are going to release it. And this is the big main advantage behind it. That's the big picture. That's the idea why we did the new engine, the new API engine 3.0, and why we also developed the new API scan. And I think we're running out of time, so we will go over. We will we have not answered all questions. We got a lot of questions, but we will try to get all questions through and email you the answers. So I'm handling over to Mark again.
Hello, and our next MOOC will be on manual testing and how to take manual testing to the next level and automate it, as well as creating better test cases from manual testing and from the manual testing approach. It'll be in 2 weeks on June the 6th at 10 o'clock in the morning CEST, as well as from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. CEST on that Wednesday as well. If you need extra help or more help, please feel free to contact us at our support@tricentis.com. If you have anything to do with our academy and would like more information about our academy or have questions about our trainings, feel free to contact us at academy.tricentis.com. Please refer to our knowledge base if you have any questions on the API or you would like understanding on how things work, as well as we have online manuals for that. Last but not least, we have a YouTube channel that we put on little questions, so small things that are like action modes or how to input Excel test sheets into our test cases. Small things that don't require a full hour MOOC or hour and a half MOOC, we have them in our YouTube channel for you to feel free to go to and experience the joy there. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at our next MOOC.